All right, guys, we are picking up with the second half of chapter 12. We are still in Exodus, second book of the Bible, chapter 12, and we are covering verses 21 through 51. So we left off where the Israelites were preparing for the feast, their Passover feast. And this is the first Passover. They are being given instructions because the final plague is coming, and this plague is going to require them to participate in this feast in the way that God tells them to, and then to mark their doorpost with the blood of this lamb that is being sacrificed for them. And this lamb is a sacrifice, and we're going to see it here. So in verse 21, Moses calls all the elders of Israel together and said, look, go ahead and get the lamb that from what we had set aside, and I want you to take this lamb. Once you slaughter it, I want you to take the blood of this lamb, dip it in hyssop. Hyssop is like a flowery branch, so it's just a good paintbrush for the day. And you're going to take that, you're going to dip it down into the blood, and you're going to strike both sides of your doorpost and the top so that the blood is on this doorpost. And once you do that, go in the house. Go eat the food you're supposed to eat. Be with your families together. Do not leave back out, because at midnight, God is coming through and he is going to strike the firstborn of every family dead that does not have this marking on the doorpost. This marking lets them know that there is a sacrifice that took place. The lamb was sacrificed for your family. And so this blood on the doorpost shows that a sacrifice was made on your behalf, and he will move past and will not strike your family with this same plague of death that is coming to Egypt. So you are going to do this. You're going to remember what's happening, and I want this to happen. And so in verse 26, there's one very cute thing and very important thing that I want to point out. And it says, when your children say to you, what do you mean by doing this? What do you mean by this service? What are you doing? When your children ask you. And I'm pointing this out for a very, very, very particular reason. We need to model our faith in front of our kids. Our kids are going to do what we do, not what we tell them to do. So we need to model our faith in front of them. If we want our children to pray, we need to pray. And when they ask us what you're doing, I'm holding a conversation with God because I need his help. We need to study the word. We need to read and pick up our Bibles and have that a part of our daily life. And when our kids ask, what are you reading? Oh, I'm reading God's word so I can learn about him. I can know more about him, and I can be obedient to him. We need to make sure that when our kids ask, because they will ask when they see us doing stuff, that we are doing something we can tell them about and that they can repeat. Okay? So, and that's what the answer is to them, to tell them that this is a sacrifice so that the Lord will pass over our house and protect us from the plague that is coming. And so in verse 28, after they were given these instructions, the people went out and did what Moses and Aaron told them to do. So they follow God's instructions. And in verse 29, it says it comes to pass that at midnight, the Lord moved through. Some places say that an angel moves through. Whichever one, angels are on assignment from God. They move and do what he tells them to do. So in this, the Lord moves through and passes over the houses that have the blood on the doorpost and are protected because they are obedient, and moves and actually goes through. And it says there's a great cry that comes out in Egypt in verse 30, because there is not a single house where there was not one dead. Everyone lost someone. Every household lost someone. And so verse 31, it says, Pharaoh rose up at night and he called for Moses and Aaron and said, get out of here. Get out of here. Go serve the Lord as you wanted to. Get out of here. Get your people, get your cattle, take your kids, get out. And he, at this point, he's up. This is still in the night. Midnight is when everything passed through. Pharaoh gets up during the night. So it's like a clock in the morning. It's a good 2, 3 o'clock in the morning. This is not the next day. Everyone awakes to see this. This happens during the night. And he's like, get up and get your people. Go and get them. Get them and take everybody. He said, take your flocks and your herds and you be gone. And be gone. And in verse 32, he says, and bless me also. Remember, this was not let my people go to freedom. Now, it didn't stop there. It was let my people go to worship. So when he's telling them to leave, he's telling them to leave and go out and worship. Go out and worship. And while you're out there worshiping your God, pray for me because my heart is broken too. I just lost my firstborn in my own house. I fall into this plague as well. I dealt with the swords and the frogs and the locusts and the hail, but now I've lost my own. My own family is hurting now. Pray for me also. And so, and in verse 33, I like this. The people, the Egyptian people who have kind of sat back next to Pharaoh, some of them believed and followed the instructions that followed what the Israelites were doing and were saved from some of these plagues. But others of them are just kind of in there. They double down with Pharaoh and they are loyal to they king. And they're like, get out of here. Because if you don't, we're all going to be dead. There's not going to be any saving us at this point. Our economy is stunted right now. We are in the struggle of our lives behind these plagues with you people, and y'all got to go. It's time for y'all to get on up out of here. And so it says the people in verse 34 through 36 is them packing up and getting everything together. They're like packing as they got to go quick. So they're throwing their food and mixing bowls and everything else together in these cloths and tying them and throwing them over their shoulders. Like those little red and white handkerchiefs they used to tie to the end of the stick in the old cartoons. Uh, that's what they're doing. They're like tying their food up in clothes so that they can carry everything. So they can carry this kind of as a bundle and they're on their way out because they are saying, get out of here, you gotta go. And so it says that they did what they were supposed to do, and they had borrowed jewels of silver, gold, and raiment. So they had already borrowed this very rich fabrics and these very important jewels and expensive jewelry. And it says that they saw favor, so they have this. And it says in verse 36, and they spoiled the Egyptians. Meaning when they were being thrown out and they're trying to pack up their whole house in a few moments, these people who lent them all their jewelry are not even worried about that. They're just like, get out of here. You gotta go. And so when they do that, they take all the jewelry that they borrowed with them as they go. And so they leave. They leave. Verse 37 and 38 say they leave and they took all of their stuff with them. It was a mixed multitude because they didn't have time to organize the sheep and organize the cows, organize the people and the kids. Everybody had to go. So there's this mixed group of just walking and everything's they're not in any particular order yet. And so it says that they stopped along the way and they baked the cake. So the unleavened bread that they had, or the dough for it, is still sitting there. So they had to stop and build fires and bake cakes because they didn't even have food packed. They had nothing. There's no sandwiches in the cooler, no Capri Suns or little juice boxes or something in there. There's no bags of chips ready to go. They just have to bake off the dough that was resting because they didn't have time to prepare anything else. And so they traveled in verse 40 of Mark, and it says the time of the children of Israel living in Egypt was 430 years. There is a period of time where they lived while Joseph was still alive and while the rulers who knew Joseph were still alive. And so there was a period of peace in the beginning while they were there. So it's 430 years total that they were in that place. Some of it was good because it was during the time that Joseph was alive. And we had already read that part. And some of it was the 400 years of slavery that God had already told Abraham was coming. And so everyone got to see God deliver his people from Egypt. It was a big rush. Whole crowd of people come out of this land real fast. They hear the cry, the mourning. Word gets around that there have been all these plagues and now the firstborn have died, and it is absolute pandemonium and insanity, and the other countries and cities surrounding them have heard the word of this, and now everyone sees how God had delivered his people with a mighty hand in the way that he said. And so verses 43 through 51, which are the close of this chapter, is where God is telling Moses and Aaron, here's how you handle the Passover. Here's who's supposed to participate in it, because I asked you to mark it. And so I want you to make sure that they're doing it correctly. And so this is a family thing, because people came together as families to share this land and be inside of the household and be protected together. So this is a family thing. And so it talks about if you have servants that you own, or if you have servants that work for you, if you have people who have decided they're gonna be a part of you, strangers who join your group, people who have married in from a different culture, and there is a spot where I want to, verse 48, when a stranger shall sojourn with you and will keep the Passover to the Lord. When a stranger is just someone who's not an Israelite, someone who's of a different culture, of a different, and I'm saying culture because race is kind of interesting at this point. Most of these people are different cultures, similar areas. So they may look the same racially, but they are different in culture and behavior and belief. So here it says, if you have a stranger that wants to sojourn or live or be a part of your culture, a part of your belief system, a part of your family, they have to be circumcised then, because circumcision was the mark of the Hebrew. That was the mark to show people that you were dedicated and committed to God. You were a part of his family. All the males in his family were circumcised. I'm saying males. All the males in his family were circumcised. And so if there was a stranger, I want to point that out, because if they are a ragtag group of this mixed multitude of people that are out and about, that are just finding their freedom and don't have anywhere to go, really don't have any resources, the strangers that would be among them, one, he's talking future tense, that there are going to be people who you're going to come in contact with, or who are going to believe God because of the story that you have, the testimony that you carry. They're going to believe and join you. But there are Egyptians who believed through the plagues and joined the Israelites when they left, because they saw the hand of God, and they decided that what they had known to be true was a lie, and they were going to serve a true and living God. And so they left what they had known and went with the Israelites as well. And these strangers, or these people who were being joined to this culture of people, this family of people of God, now had to be marked in that way, and they would be circumcised. And so in order for you to participate in this, you had to be circumcised, and you had to be in the household. A foreigner or a hired servant could not, but a servant who is a part of your family, and that's something that you would do if this becomes a lifelong, this becomes a lifelong thing. Not that you are a slave and unable to leave, like forbidden to leave, because why would you leave slavery with slaves? But it is a servant in that you would have an au pair. You would have like Batman and Batman and Alfred. Like, they're a team, but Alfred is a servant. It's still part of his family. That is the only family that Bruce Wayne knows. Like, he helped raise him after his parents died. And I'm using that as an analogy to understand that this is not slaves. These are servants who have joined the family. And that's what I mean. Some people have an occupation. You have a nanny who has been with you through all of your kids, and they decide to stay. And they may switch their role and care for an elderly family member instead of caring for the children. But they are joined to this family, to a place where they're like a surrogate aunt, a surrogate cousin, something like that. So that's what they mean when they say a stranger who wants to live with you. It's someone who is not born into your culture, born into your family, but has joined through belief and lifestyle change. Okay. So, and we'll see that a little bit more as we get further. Well, we saw it when we talked about Abraham, when Abraham said, I don't have any sons, and I'm going to leave my legacy to a servant. It was someone who had been born in his household, who was not from his biological family, but was part of his extended family that he took on and was comfortable leaving everything he owned to him, who was a very wealthy man. So that's just an example of what that looks like. Um, and so in verse 50, they did what they were told. They learned how to do it. They made sure that everyone who left with them was circumcised and was bound to the agreement, the covenant that God has with the Hebrews or the Israelites. And it says that God, in verse 51, that God did bring the children of Israel out of the land of Egypt by their armies. They came out without a fight, without a battle, without a war. God did all the work. All they had to do was trust him and be obedient. So I want to encourage you, and do a quick recap, but I want to encourage you to trust God and be obedient to his plan. It doesn't always seem like what you think it's going to be. It doesn't always seem like it's going to work out well. It made absolutely no sense to eat dinner with my shoes on and borrow some bracelets from my neighbor. But when God moved, I now was ready to move with him, and I had wealth. I'm not an escaped slave with lint in my pockets. I'm an escaped slave with riches in my pockets, which makes a world of difference and opens up opportunities that would not have normally been there. So, quick recap from verses 21 to 51. The instruction was that they were going to put the blood on both sides of their doorposts and across the top, and they would go in the house. And they would stay in the house until they were told to leave Egypt. And so they go in, they do this, all the people of Israel do this, and they are saved as God moves through this land of Egypt, and the firstborn, as he promised, are all dead, are all killed. And so Egypt awakes with this really sullen, grief-stricken, mournful cry, and they tell the people, leave, get out of here. Your God is out here acting a whole fool and just taking us out, and we ain't trying to go. We all gonna be dead fooling with your God. So get out of here, leave, go do what you want to do. Pharaoh says, kick them out. They gotta go, and they leave with this mighty. They said that God said that he would have Pharaoh move them out with a mighty hand. They were forced out. And so the people just threw what they could in some clothes, bound it up, made these little bundles so that they could carry their things out of there and leave. And in the process, all the gold and silver and jewelry that they borrowed is tucked away with them. And they've actually spoiled the land. They've actually taken lots of wealth and riches from Egypt in the process. And so, Pharaoh tells them to leave. The people do leave. They get out and they leave, and it's a mixed multitude. It's just a big old bundle of people getting out because they didn't have time to organize. Like, they were sleeping with their shoes on. This happened overnight. And so as they leave, they get a little way out and they stop and they bake these cakes, which is these unleavened bread. They bake it because they didn't have time to let the dough rise. They didn't have time to do anything. So they didn't pack lunch for this. They didn't have food for the journey. So they baked these cakes so that they could survive. And then God gives them the rules for the Passover. Who can participate, how they can participate, what needs to be done, and how it's going to be done, so that when the anniversary of this comes around, they are prepared and they can treat it properly. Okay? So again, be super, super obedient to God. It is how he protects you. It is what he gives you. And make sure that we are taking care of each other. God has pulled these people out as his own family. We are members as believers of his family. And I want to make sure that we take the time to really understand that and behave as members of a family. Y'all be blessed.